Hi, friend. Welcome to Wild and Waking, a sacred space for the woman unraveling what no longer fits, remembering the truth that's always lived inside her, reclaiming her joy, her voice, her power, and rising fully, fiercely, and without apology. I'm your host, Emily Rushell, and together we'll explore what it means to live in alignment, lead with soul, and awaken a life of abundance, authenticity, and purpose. Let's begin. Hi, friends. Welcome back to Wild and Waking. Today, I am introducing you to someone who has become a dear friend. And I swear, like, same person, different font. Like, the number of things that she talks about and that she cares about and that, like, her life mission is rooted in, I'm like, literally same. We found each other at exactly the right time. Today, we are going to be talking about identity, disinformation, like how our entire worldview is shaped by the media that we consume, like what that really looks like on an intentional level, what it looks like to go through the stair steps of transforming identity, what it looks like to build generational emotional intelligence, like how everything has shaped our current reality and ultimately the work that we are doing as individuals and as a collective to transform what comes forward or what comes next. I am so excited for this conversation. We may also go on 100 spirals into Percy Jackson and the Odyssey.
Yes, because I just watched the Odyssey last night.
Welcome to the podcast. If someone's getting to know you for the very first time, will you give us a little context of who you are, where you are, and ultimately what brought you into the work you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Sridaya. I am calling in from Toronto, which is the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. And I come into this world of Emily, currently running a spiritual business called Manifest in Color, and with a background in policymaking for the government a while ago, a past life, where I was exposed to a lot of research on how a person's identity actually creates their ability to absorb new information or not, and how that has maybe led to being exploited because everybody is trying to grab a piece of everyone's attention these days. And how that is also leading to us being so disconnected from each other as people on this planet. And which I think the official term is social polarization. So that sounds on paper like so different and so academic from the work that I do with women. I tend to work a lot with like immigrant women, specifically because that's my own personal experience. And it's just been fascinating to see and develop my own philosophies, my own opinions, because I simply come to this work coming from such a divergent background of psychology, of social polarization, of disinformation, but also learning Reiki, being a hypnotherapist in training, and helping women manifest their desires from changing the root thoughts that form their identity. That is the work that I do. And so I'm just so excited to be here to have this conversation today with you because you put out this like thing on Threads and I was like, I need to talk to her. I need to talk to her.
You're like, that's oddly specific and literally me.
Literally. I'm like, what is even happening? So yes, I had to be here and I had to befriend you.
The last time we talked, I think we talked for multiple hours and only got off because you had a call or my baby was crying or something like that.
I believe that is the case. Yes.
No, I mean, my listeners know this, but I am obsessed with women who have this like really diverse, like multidisciplinary approach that has informed the work that they're doing today. Because I think that that is what's really transforming mindsets and identities and perspectives over time. It's like the women like us who are looking at this and that and this and that and pulling from everything and like, you know, creating constellations out of these like seemingly separated stars of information to really craft this cohesive messaging that deeply resonates and being able to like not do it in an isolated silo of just manifestation or just politics or just psychology or just mindset. It's like being able to weave it all together while also taking into consideration these very specific experiences that the women that are attracted to you have also been through. Like, I love it so much.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I believe the clinical term for that is neurodivergent. But
Okay, fair. Fair.
it's okay. I don't remember all the time that I can be quite funny, but sometimes I impress myself, and that was one of those moments. Yes, absolutely. I have a very improv approach to life
Mhm.
in that I say yes and instead of but, right? I think a lot more things are interconnected than we give them credit for. And it's a fallacy that we have to compartmentalize ourselves. I see this, funnily enough, in the work that I do with women trying to transform their lives. A lot of people come to me through where the pain is the most in their life. So they like really want to manifest their dream partner, for example, right? They come to me, and then when we get to the root issue, which is what I am able to do through the hypno Reiki method that I created, and we actually reconfigure that completely, they first start seeing changes in their career. And vice
Mm,
versa, when people come to me and they're having this pain point with career, I'm often able to help them improve the relationship they have with their partner if they're married, or actually improve their dating life, even though they weren't even concerned about that, or their relationship with family, parents, children, etc. Everything changes, which makes sense, right? Because our subconscious doesn't actually know the difference. All of our subconsciouses don't know the difference between this is a workplace issue versus this is a mom and dad issue versus this is a why am I single for so many years issue. Our brain doesn't know. It is operating from a certain ceiling that was placed on us between the ages of 0 and 10. And when I found that out, I could have rioted because I was like, what do you mean this happened without my consent, right? We don't
yeah.
realize it, but ceilings have been placed on our identity just based off of where we were born, who we were born to. And that's like not, so like think about how much further that goes than just your social location and your access to wealth, right? Like actually goes to so many things beyond that. And I think
Mhm.
that means that, for example, if you saw a dysfunctional marriage, chances are you're going to have a dysfunctional marriage unless you intervene and realize, oh, I need to do a little bit of work around this, right? And like we
Yeah.
call that ego death in the spiritual world, but really what that is an identity repatterning. If for the people who don't want to call it using a spiritual term, it's all the same.
Oh my gosh, I feel like there's so many directions we can go. But I let's just start with even the notion of, okay, there's a pattern that I'm recognizing
Mm-hmm.
in my life that I desire to transform, whether it's career, whether it's a partner, whether it is a religious, spiritual, political, perspective
Mm-hmm.
identity. I know before we hit record, you were talking about this idea of the staircase of identity as a means to transform perspective. Would you give us some insight as to what that looks like?
Absolutely. So, to whoever is listening, let's do this exercise together. And Emily, you do it too, right? Think about something. Think about a result that you have. It doesn't have to be positive or negative. If you want to do a negative result that you've had recently, right? Just like bring that to mind, make that alive in your brain and your body for a few seconds. So, in order to have that result, we zoom all the way back, there had to have been certain thoughts that created that result. And I call this a staircase of identity because at some point you've had a certain thought, like, for example, like when let's just say I'm like, I really want to attract new clients to my business last year, but I was coming to it from a place of, well, I'm not professional yet. That was the root thought, which led to a state of insecurity. So thoughts lead to a state of being. So the being was, I'm insecure. I'm actually, I don't have enough, whatever enough means, enough clients to feel like this is me legit, right? Like I'm talking about like a year and a half ago. That was the result I had was why am I not getting, like I'm having a hard time attracting new people into my life, like for clientele. And so then the thought I was having was like, I'm not professional yet. So what did that lead to? A say insecurity. And then what behavior did that lead to? Well, for me, it led to not purchasing a website domain because it's like, I have
Hmm.
to do that only when I'm professional. But then we'll think about other behaviors. Maybe when people ask me what I did, I shied away from answering it confidently. That's another behavior. And then what's the outcome from that? Well, there's no website. There's no like ways in which people can legitimize me. So then inherently, my root thought of, well, I'm not professional yet. I had that thought because I was waiting for someone else to legitimize me. But as long as I was waiting for that, it would never arrive because I wasn't behaving in a legitimate way. Right. So I'm sure you could do this with like anything that you've had recently. Right. But then what happens when you actually go down that staircase? And I kind of think of it like magical staircases you see at Hogwarts, right? Like they're always moving. So depending on the thought you enter the staircase with, the staircase leads somewhere new. So if you keep ending up in the same place, like I'm not attracting, I'm not, what is the thought you entered the staircase with today? That is a staircase of identity. Because that's why you keep having the same experiences. The same experiences end up leading to you creating an identity around, I don't insert here, right?
Hmm.
Or I can look at it as like a new thought. What if I installed a new thought at the bottom of the staircase? So what was the one that I actually installed? It's like, I know that I have transformed my life and a few other people's lives. And if I've done it before, I can do it again. Well, then what state of being does that lead to? A little bit more self-assured, right? And notice it's still believable. I'm not saying I'm the world's best coach. I'm not saying that, right? So like
Right.
it's a more believable, rooted in reality kind of a thought because like, listen, your brain's really smart. And that's why those like out of the realm of possibility kind of affirmations don't work for people because they're
Hmm.
not rooted in a thought they can actually believe,
Yeah, they're
right?
lies.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Clock in. So from the thoughts, we go into the state. So then I'm a bit more assured because I'm like, yeah, that is true. I did in fact like transform my life and I transformed a few other people's lives along the way. Whether they were paid clients or not, I've actually transformed all the lives of my friends. I can maybe take a little bit, like a 5% ownership of, because listen, to transform, you have to choose, obviously. But it's like, I have influenced so many people. So like you get more confident. And from that state of being, what did I do with that behavior? Well, I was like, let me purchase this or let me get coaching support on this, right? Like then you choose differently. You choose different behaviors. And then the outcome is more people find me. I
Hmm.
actually have a strategy for client acquisition. I just have a way more confident approach to explaining what I do for a living. And that also means that translates into everything I do. And that brings more people into my world. So that is how like you can change your outcome by changing the thoughts, creating your identity at the very core, at the bottom of the staircase.
So it sounds to me like rather than, I think sometimes we think in absolutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we try so hard to like be or do or think the like total antithesis of where we know that we're stuck. And then we find ourselves like getting tripped up and like reverting back. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like what you're saying is tracing it back down to the root and giving yourself like incremental evidence against it that feels true and
Mhm.
continuing to like deposit in the bank and like rely on that like 1% or 5% like better while
Mhm.
holding the like vision for what you know is possible.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. And you can use this to even look at, I mean, if a source of frustration in your life is conflict with a family member because they have different views, different beliefs than you can also use this there, right? Because if you go into it with thoughts like, that person just doesn't get me. That person thinks they're so much better than everyone else. Well, what's the result going to be? You're going to go embracing for impact versus, sometimes this person can say things that I don't fully agree with. And also, they have these amazing qualities. It's like, how do we, I feel like this right here is like my whole thesis around how we solve social polarization. Because it's just,
Yes.
again, what thoughts are we choosing to give
Hmm.
energy to today? And like, of course, like we have people with different views. And maybe, hey, some people are not going to be willing to do this work. And
Yeah.
we can't resent them for it. We still have to do I think we should still be the change we wish to see in the world. Like, I think that
Yeah.
quote is true. And how do we do that? It's because we change the thought with which we approach the situation. So don't look at them in a way of like, they're always going to do. Again, you know how you mentioned absolutes, right? Always and never, take those words out of your vocabulary. And you catch
Mm-hmm.
yourself thinking that, you have to just be like, okay, well, they sometimes do this and they also do all these amazing kind things. So let's enter this thing with this. And then your state of being will change instead of being combative to being somebody who's curious. And then that could lead to a better conversation and a better time spent together.
I would love to go back to something you said in the beginning that you learned in your previous life about the ways that our identities are formed,
Mhm.
specifically in like religious, political, spiritual worldview, identity perspective, and how that influences and impacts our ability to receive information or not.
Yeah. So this is all comes to this whole thing back in like 2017. People really thought fact checking was going to be the solution.
Mm,
Can we really look around and say that fact checking has actually solved the fake news problem?
no.
We can't really say that, right? It goes a certain level, it goes a certain mile, it goes a certain distance with some types of people, but it doesn't actually solve things. Why? Because again, it's because we're not aware that these thoughts that were actually baked into us before the age of 10 are actually kind of governing just how far we can go to absorbing new pieces of information if we leave it unattended. And so, like, again, if you're listening to this and feeling like, wait, yeah, like I've been changing my mind around something recently, maybe I'm thinking something different than maybe what my parents raised me, and I'm having a hard time grappling with that. Like, that's okay. Like, you're not inherently wrong or bad. You just weren't taught this, right? None of
Mm-hmm.
us were really taught this. But what happens is it becomes easier to accept data, a new piece of information, as long as it confirms your existing beliefs. This because that is how the brain is kind of pushed to filter information since
Mm-hmm.
you were a kid, right? And so, of
Right.
course, the amazing thing about the brain is we do have neuroplasticity, right? But then it's like, how do you convince loads of people who are just out here trying to live a life, make ends meet, are in a rush, and are on social media just to get a break from the craziness that is life? Like, how do you tell everybody? You can't, right? You can't be like, hey, take a minute, like pause and maybe reflect on nobody's like alerting that. And
Right.
these social media companies don't have an incentive to like encourage you to necessarily do that because rage creates views, which creates clicks, which creates advertising dollars.
Mm. It all goes back to capitalism now, doesn't it?
Sure. I am so careful with saying that, but yeah, no, actually that is true. It actually does come back down to that. And at the same time, it's like, hey, there's like certain routes, certain vehicles of accountability, which is like what I was maybe a little bit part of in my past life with government, like policy making and things. You try to nudge, right? You try to create nudges. You create a little bit of accountability in that way. So in theory, it works, right? Like in theory, that should work. And then it's just that in
Mm-hmm.
practice, there's just so many more steps to try and keep people accountable in the existing bureaucratic structures that it just takes forever. And hey, profit driven companies have found loopholes for everything, right? In the time it takes for an actual accountability structure to be formed. Unfortunately, technology is moving way faster than our bureaucratic structures can keep up with. And
Mm.
that's how you get the mess that you have today.
Right.
Because it's not like people haven't always had differing opinions or differing thoughts or differing political views. The thing is that for the majority of life, we all lived within smaller communities and we only
Right.
really knew what was happening immediately around us. And that's about it, right? Like we didn't actually know what was happening around the globe. We didn't know what was happening in Australia. We didn't know what was
Mm-hmm.
happening in like Cape Town. Like we didn't know what was happening in so many places in the world in great detail. We just heard of it. But the fact that everything's at our fingertips now, it just means the velocity, like the
Yes.
speed and the urgency and force with which things arrive on our plates, on our minds, is just way faster than the human body and brain have evolved to cope with.
Yes. Okay. I would love to dive into your perspective on this because as so many of our listeners are, socially aware, are evolving, are like really passionate, are like being ignited with this rage of 1,000 lifetimes while also like becoming deeply in touch with themselves and their spirituality. Like, I feel like in a lot of spiritual spaces, there's the like, no, just focus on yourself and your ascension and like the world will be better. And then there's like the alternative of like really angry people shouting from really unhealthy spaces and like burning themselves out and like drowning in the consumption and like the misery of the times, right? Those are two like very extremes, but I think it can be really confusing of like, how do I integrate this like feeling grounded and connection to like myself and source and the world, and
Mhm.
also being connected and tapped in and like fighting for collective change. Like, what's your perspective on all of that?
Thank you so much for asking that question in that way. Because I've been in both those. I've been in both those spaces,
Mhm.
right? And maybe I've even been both archetypes of people. I'm not too proud to admit that. Like, I think it's okay to admit that you've done things that you are no longer in agreement with, right? Like, I think I've been in both those spaces. And I think the answer, like most things, is it's not either or. There's actually a middle, which is, I guess, what I'm trying to create in the wellness space, to be very honest. Like, there is a middle ground where you can look at the injustices happening in the world around you and do your part in furthering or awareness or helping within reason. And there's also a piece of this where if you do not give yourself time to connect with your own soul, then you're not actually connecting more and more with what your soul's purpose on this earth is. And
Mhm.
you will find a way to make your soul's purpose on this earth actually connect from the individual to the community, where you can actually do that. The anger sometimes is a invitation for people who've never been allowed to have anger ever in their life,
Mhm.
suddenly have this one thing. And I've been that person. Suddenly it all makes sense, right? I've been extremely angry. And I have been the person that was like calling out white people at every turn. That was a phase of my life. I'm not that person anymore.
Mhm.
I see things very differently now. I actually see us all as interconnected beings with souls that are actually all on some vibrational level the same, that are actually just trying to be loved, love others, belong, and thrive. All of us want that. At the core, all of us want that. So I no longer go to that. I mean, do I think there's intersectional things that are happening and there's different levels of privilege? Absolutely, that's true. But
Mhm.
I think because of doing this identity work and this spiritual work and doing shadow work, came to this point where I'm like, hey, like anyone who's done shadow work knows how intense that shit is. Screaming, crying, throwing up. I
Literally.
myself. But guess what? All the things that we see in the world right now, that is the collective shadow. This is the
Oh my god.
proverbial.
Yes.
This is the proverbial screaming, crying, throwing up. That's what we're seeing everywhere.
Literally. Yeah.
Mhm. So that's how I kind of see these two very valid, like, I understand why it exists, right? Like, I validate why these two camps exist. I think I'm like, I urge you to understand that these two things are actually connected, and at some point being like it's only about my self-ascension is actually a bastardization of Eastern teachings,
Mhm.
which are actually about connecting to yourself in such a way that you understand that your soul is actually carries a piece that is in every living thing around you and every non-living thing around
Yeah.
you as well. That's like a summary of like one of the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita that I'm like doing in my Bhagavad Gita study, but like in the sense of just like that's the actual idea, is that there is
Mhm.
divinity in everything and everyone,
Yes.
including the people we don't like.
Mm-hmm. That's a very unpopular opinion.
Yeah, but
And
that
I share that with you. I share that with you. You know, I think it can be really easy, no matter where you stand, to be able to look at someone who is the opposite of your belief system and create a narrative around it in order to validate your own identity. And, you know, I do believe that there are systems and structures and people and leaders to which we do need to bring like a hyper awareness of what has created the reality that we exist in. I do believe that there's a lot of truth to be uncovered for everyone. But
Mhm.
I believe that in order to heal as a collective and move forward and get through this like current iteration of shadow work, I so am with you that like in the arc of humanity, we are going through it. And also, like the more history I read, the more I'm like, we have always been going through it. Like,
Yeah.
we've
I
always
think
been
the
going through it.
Yeah, I mean, I watched The Odyssey last night, and frankly, yeah.
Like, we're not that
Um,
special.
yeah, we are not. It's the tools and the weapons at hand are just way more sophisticated.
Mhm.
Damn, that was a line.
That was a line. But I do believe that, like, I know that you had talked about generational emotional intelligence, and I do think
Yes.
there's so much to be said that, like, you know, I know a lot of women like me who came into the world, into the workforce specifically, like wanting to make the world a better place, like wanting to help people. And it was
Yeah.
very external. And for me, I know very much came from a need to be important or needed or
Oh my gosh.
like
Thank you for saying that out loud, 'cause I
worthy
feel
of,
that.
oh my gosh, just like if I can do enough for everyone else, then I will be worthy of love. But what I have learned is actually the opposite is true, is the more that you heal and nurture yourself, like the more that you are that ripple effect for others. Like you are genuinely changing the trajectory of your children and your partner and your friends and your circle of influence in your community. Like I have said for years and years and years that the overarching mission of what I do is transforming rural communities from the inside out through the hearts of rural women.
Yeah.
Like so much of the systemic change really does happen in the work we do with ourselves.
It does. It does. And I think that's kind of you talked about those the like being really outwardly angry about every single injustice and then also maybe the slight holier than thou attitude of a certain camp. And then there's the also, well, I just need to focus on myself and be the best I can be. And you mentioned something that I shared earlier, which is that I believe the greater, grander mission that I'm here for is to teach people how to build generational emotional intelligence, right? And that's you've heard of generational wealth before and how to like, like there's lots of people who like teach you how to do that.
Mhm.
But why am I narrowing in on generational emotional intelligence? Because I think for far too long, we've only focused on an identity around cycle breaking, which is like
Mm.
beautiful. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful identity, but it's also a heavy identity, right? And
Mhm.
it's work. But I'm looking at what is it that we're actually leaving behind. And I think
What are
that
we
is this
starting?
exactly. It's this idea of generational emotional intelligence where when we do the work internally, right, we find our own things that we learned along the way that is not useful to us. Or maybe it's like, oh, this is useful to me, but in certain situations only, right? Like you have to do that inner diving and, going back to the staircase of identity and realizing and examining our thoughts and how they lead to the outcomes we are living. All of that together allows us to then also be more present in a way around our nieces, our nephews, our nibblings, our children, if we choose to have them. All of that has ripple effects because when people are able to understand that this is kind of how their internal world really is, I do think you can create a way better future and you can actually be present for the misfortunes and inequities that exist in the world around us. You can be more present for that and find solutions for that. And so
Mhm.
in a nutshell, going back to that thing about like, oh, those two kind of camps in like in left leaning or spiritual spaces, I feel like that my journey has been figuring out how do I heal myself and how is me healing myself and then creating something like Manifest in Color that I've now created. How does that impact the causes I really care about? And I think it is this path. And that is how I think a lot of us can make sense of it as not a dichotomy, but a middle ground where we realize our own skill sets and what we bring to the revolution, so to speak, right? What are we bringing to it? And you can
Mm-hmm.
just kind of keep doing that. And you're right, it is those smaller, intimate conversations. That is
Yeah.
what creates change. Being able to sit across from someone that might on paper have fundamentally different beliefs than you on a certain hot button topic in the world right now, and actually realize you have way more in common than you have differences. That creates change. You're doing that through this podcast, through all the work you're doing in rural communities. I might be doing it with immigrant women and allowing them to live more fulfilling lives, because I think everybody is inherently worthy of a very fulfilling life.
Yeah. I think there is so much to be said of the way identities and belief systems change over time when you have the safety in which to explore new ones. And so often, going back to your work in disinformation and polarization, like when we
Mhm.
are so entrenched in the silos around us, it is very viscerally terrifying to step outside,
Mhm.
right? When our entire community, our entire network, everything we have ever known is like so tightly wound in this ball or in this box or this bubble, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Anything outside of that is like a complete and total shock to our system. And so that's why we see so many people double down and stay in situations, even if they have those like internal intuitive alarms going off that they have also been taught to dismiss systemically on purpose, right? But like when there's no example of it that feels safe enough, right? If like the opposite of it is so far away, like of course we're going to stay within our bubble and our circle. And so I do believe that this is where so many women or people who are willing to walk in the middle are going to be the torchbearers moving forward, who are willing to find that common ground and who can say like, hey, like here's all the commonalities, here's all the ways that our lives and our goals and our desires and beliefs are the same. Like, let me help stretch you just enough that like it feels safe in your body enough to explore and to be curious and to like try on new things. Like you
Right.
said, going back to that stair step, like we have to be able to have examples that are just close enough to our circle of influence to be able
Mhm.
to open the door to explore. And then, I mean, you want to talk about a winding staircase that magically moves in a million directions. Like once you have that safety of exploration, then the world is your oyster, right? But in order to like get past these boxes, these bubbles, these circles, these silos that we exist in, like there has to be people willing to be bridges to like walk
Absolutely.
people into new ideas within their realm of safety.
I think it was Rania El Mugamar. Either it's her quote or she quoted somebody else. But I remember being in like a lunch and learn session with Rania, and it was about this topic on how do we create the social change we want to see. And she said, each one, reach one, teach one.
Ooh.
Yeah, each one, reach one, teach one. So we can't look at things as like, I'm going to go move somebody who is on the polar opposite side.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at somebody who is maybe a little bit closer so each one reaches one, and then you gently stretch. And then
Mm-hmm.
that person can gently stretch, and that person can like, and then it just has this positive ripple effect that is, I think, a succinct way of kind of like, saying what you were saying, about it
Yeah.
all. And I'll also say, I had this like spiritual thought when you were speaking, and something I may have just like left the ethers of my brain, which happens a lot. It's those tabs that are open in our brains. Um,
They call that neurodivergent.
Oh, I love a good circle back joke. Oh, girl, yes. I think it's realizing that when you can create change within just one person, it doesn't even have to be the person that's outside of you. It could just be that you change your own life, and that is a
Mhm.
life changed. And I think
Yeah.
that is a bit of that spiritual inner journey, right?
Mm.
And it's that what I think naturally I think happens when you're actually doing the inner work, like not from like a I think a lot of people slip into spiritual ego while talking about their spiritual journeys, which is like it's so easy to like slip into that. But I think it's like when you're doing the work in a way that's very earnest and honest with yourself, when you get to this place of self compassion and you're able to be with yourself. I found my point. Be able to be with yourself through the scary, right?
Mhm.
Yes, of course. Like I'm not saying hyper independence here, but I think a lot of the times we're siloed off politically and socially because we want to belong to the people around us.
100%.
And at the same time, there is this thing of like when we keep putting our power outside of us, including
Mhm.
to the people around us,
Mhm.
we're actually kind of moving away from the piece of divinity that is inside of us
100%.
also. And that piece of divinity inside us is that conscience, is that inner guidance, is that inner voice. That is our soul talking to us. And I
Mhm.
think that is the piece of divinity that is the God that lives inside us.
Mhm.
And when we're able to sit with the discomfort of believing something that the people around us don't immediately believe,
Mhm.
it's like it's so hard. And I think it's important to recognize if you're going through that to have the compassion that, hey, this is a very hard situation. And it's
Mhm.
and the second we show ourselves actually the compassion instead of brushing it aside, we actually learn to stay with ourselves in the uncertain. And at the end of the day, learning to stay with ourselves and maybe even having fun in the uncertain is ultimately the most magnetic thing you can do because you have found your own piece of the divine within you that you are like having faith in.
Yes. Oh
And
my
I think
gosh,
like
there
that is how the spiritual connects to the political is that it's that can you actually be nice to yourself?
can you actually sit with yourself? That is so true. Like, so much of our identity is outsourced to belonging, and
Mhm.
changing the belief means risking belonging, which
Yeah.
is visceral if you do not belong to yourself. There's something I posted on Threads a couple days ago, which I feel like is exactly what you said in so many ways. Sure, the fear of being seen is hard, but I think you're actually afraid of looking in the mirror. Learn to truly befriend and hold the depths of yourself. A woman who has
Yeah.
met her darkness does not falter under the weight of perception.
Absolutely.
It's like when you belong to yourself, when you truly know, love, and trust yourself, when you are grounded in who you are, what you believe, or really safe in the uncertainty and the unknowing, you are drastically less influenced or afraid of those perceptions, that lack of belonging, that like not being attached to a certain identity or belief system. But that's the work, is like being able to go down to the
Yeah.
depths and like rebuild that relationship with self, with your divinity, with your
Yeah.
spirituality, with like who you are at your core, not who you have performed to be.
Exactly. Exactly. And I would also say, I don't want anybody listening to this to feel any type of shame at all for prioritizing belonging because we have evolved from cave people and we need, in order to survive, you needed to be able to sleep together around a fire to survive the night.
Right.
It is really encoded within us. And I don't want anybody listening to this to carry any shame about prioritizing belonging. I think that is like the whole I think my theory on why we've been created is that we have these tendencies and our whole life is actually supposed to be about walking away from the tendencies we naturally come to.
Mm.
I mean, that is like, again, like come from a lot of my like spiritual teachings, like that I read and I like stay with. But I think a lot of Eastern philosophies point to this thing of like you're coming into this life with a bucket of like, you're coming with like past life
Mm-hmm.
things that you're carrying into this. Your soul is coming into this lifetime with a lot of things. That means you're going to be placed in the family, in the situation that allows you to see if you can like remove some of that past life karma. So then karma becomes this thing actually it all comes back down to like patterns, recognizing patterns in your own behavior, in your own circumstances. And if you see that you're still having the same outcome in a particular part of your life over and over and over again, a little bit into like my manifestation philosophy and
Yeah.
stuff. But when we see that something is constantly, I really want this thing and it's not happening, I think there's a root pattern there that is encoded that is begging to be examined. And it is actually the universe telling you, please look at this thing. Actually, it's a gift to be frustrated because
Yeah.
let that frustration not be, I'm bad, or like, let it not transform into shame and guilt. Let that become the thing that allows you to ask yourself, where am I being asked to shift out of my tendencies? That
Mm.
is it. I mean, that's like the takeaways that I've had
Mic
recently.
drop.
Yeah, the universe is offering you an opportunity at every moment. The frustration you have in life is an invitation, always. And I think
Mm-hmm.
when we also choose to live life that way, life stops happening to us and starts happening for us.
Mm.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of conversations in my community lately of like, what does it look like to be the one that go first and like
Mhm.
create belonging for other people around like the person you're evolving into? Because so true. Like we have evolved from you would literally die if you did not belong to your village.
Yeah.
If you were cast away, like that meant like you were in danger, in peril. And so I know a lot of women in my community are like, okay, well, if I don't belong to this group and
Mhm.
I've done the work within myself and I no longer identify with that, like there's this ache of loneliness. And so a conversation that's been coming up a lot is like, okay, now how do I, alchemize what I have been through and invite other people into this journey and create a belonging that is rooted in like where I'm at right now, which it requires a new level of vulnerability and bravery to go first. Anyway, we could record a whole nother episode on that. What I love about this conversation, it is full of contradictions because that is life, right? And I think
Yeah.
part of what has created what we're in right now is this like need to have been like very decisive in like one idea and to not embrace that like nuance in that gray area. But like you said, like life is yes
Mhm.
and I think part of what I would like a listener to take away from this is like being able to be introspective of where you're at in your journey and like what piece is calling you forward in this like cyclical moment of your life. Because there are seasons for being really internal, there are seasons for moving more external, there are seasons
Yeah.
for all different pieces of it. And the permission that I constantly want to give listeners is that space in between and being willing to hold the
Yeah.
unknown, being able to hold the duality, hold the nuance,
Mhm.
hold the like situational awareness of like there isn't one answer that applies to every person or every situation, but the safety to explore like different angles of the conversation and be able to take the pieces that speak to you in this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're so right about people needing to be decisive and that kind of it's like being put in a box or putting things into neat categories of boxes
Mhm.
is just something that we have said is what has to happen. And I would say me personally, the only decision that I've made is that I'm not going to leave myself. Right. I
Mm.
think if that's the only like let that be the decisive point and everything else just be play. Right. Let
Yeah.
everything else exist between everything's a spectrum. Truly, human experience is a spectrum, and it's like the sooner we accept that, the sooner we're able to just make the decision that, okay, like but I won't leave myself. I will still speak to myself with compassion or catch myself when I am not so that I can come back to it. If that can be the one decision, I think that is where I have landed for myself.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, before we close out, question I ask every guest who comes on the show is what does growth look like for you in this specific season?
Growth for me looks like having fun, even though I don't know what's coming next, what my next season of clientele looks like, not knowing whether any business decision I've made recently is going to work out as I wanted to or not. So many uncertainties, and to still have play and fun in the face of uncertainty. That is my growth edge at the moment.
I love it. All right. Tell us more about the work that you do, how we can get connected to you, how we can find out more about all the beautiful things you're doing in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. The handle is at Manifest in Color, spelled with an OU because I am Canadian. And yeah, my name is Sridaya, Sridaya. My last name is Srivatsan, Srivatsan. And the way you can work with me is I do always offer like a one free diagnostic. I help people get to the bottom pattern of thought that is creating their current staircase. And I help them understand how to get to the staircase they really want to be on. And that's always there. So if you're curious, that is a wonderful place to start in working with me. And I would love to guide anyone who has felt called to listen to this particular episode further.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us today. I could spend hours talking to you.
I think so. I think I think the way that we see the intersections and the interconnections is very similar. And I really do hope we get to chat even more.
We will. We will. But first, I'm going to go put purple in my hair, everybody. By the time this episode comes out, it will be there. And I'm so excited.
I cannot wait to see pictures.
I feel like I want to do like one of those cool transition reels, but I don't. I need to figure that out like in the next hour.
Oh, I can tell you how. I've done it before.
All right. Okay, perfect. Send me an example. All right, until next time. Thank you, friends. So grateful for you. Hey, friend, I hope this conversation sparked something real in you. Something that feels like truth, curiosity, or the courage to keep becoming. If this episode resonated, I'd love for you to share it. Take a screenshot, post it to your stories, or send it to one of your friends. You can always find me over on Instagram at Emily Rushel, where I love continuing these conversations and hearing your takeaways. Truly, your DMs are one of my favorite parts of podcasting, so don't be shy. I'd love to reflect and connect with you over there. I'm so grateful to be surrounded by a community of women who ask hard questions, sit in the discomfort of the unknown, blaze new paths forward, and ultimately come home to their wild and waking selves. See you next week.